Hello, 2D students. Colleen here to give you a demo to prepare us for both discussion board number 2, discussion board number 3, and getting started with our first project. So to begin, you are going to open up discussion board number 2, and you're going to need your large paper pad. You're going to need your metal ruler, your eraser, your drawing pencils. I would recommend using a lighter pencil, which will be like a 1B, 2B, or an H. You don't need to worry too much about that as long as it's just lighter. We'll talk more about that later in the semester. You're going to need your sharpener for that and your X-Acto knife, which I'll explain all this technical stuff in just a moment. We are going to do a first initial sketch of our first project. Again, it's going to be based off of our feedback that you got from me for discussion board number 1. You're going to look back at that. You're going to look at your sketches that you did for your thumbnail drawings. And then you're going to, from that, pick what you like best for your final. Or you may find, oh my gosh, Colleen, I hated everything I did before. I'm going to redo it all. And for this final or for this rough draft, I'm going to come up with something new. That's fine too. I want to really reiterate in this class that there is no wrong way to doing a lot of this stuff. It's all sequential to generate ideas, to get us thinking, but it's not mandated that you copy exactly what you did before. This is just to help you and support you get ideas for your final project. But again, this is a rough draft. So we are going to start with some pencil and then use our Sharpie and our Micron pens. But we want to ensure that, this is a reminder, this is a quicker exercise. This is not meant to take up much time. This is meant to plan out what our final will look like eventually. So again, you might want to limit yourself on time if you're the type of person that could spend hours and hours on something, because the whole point of this is to practice and to play with our ideas. Okay, so for part 1 of this submission, I'm going to show you the technical side of things and how to get everything sort of sketched out and ready. And then for part 2, I just want to point out here, you're going to be photographing your initial sketches that you're going to do for your rough draft. And then you're going to upload, this time along with your photos, you're going to be uploading a 1-paragraph response using complete sentences along with your submission. And you're just going to answer the questions that are posted here. Did you run into any challenges when creating your rough draft? And are there any areas of your composition that you'd like specific feedback on, something that you're unsure about? This is going to help me when I provide you feedback from this post when I grade it, so that when you start your final draft, you get more of your footing of what you're going to do. Okay, so the next step is I'm going to show you some of the technical stuff. So give me 1 second while I stop sharing my screen, and then we'll go from there. All right, thank you for letting me get that switched. Okay, so for the technical side of what we're going to be doing today, you are going to draw out 3 squares that are 6 inches by 6 inches. And that's because our final is also using the same dimensions. All right. And you're going to draw them out on your piece of paper. You can either, if you have an 18 by 24, that's great. You can fill up the whole page. Or if you have a smaller paper pad, that's fine too. You can draw it over, as small or big of a piece of paper as you have. But you want to make sure you're orienting your squares how you want them. So that, again, they can be horizontal, they can be vertical, they can be diagonal. Look back at those past student examples if you need to. You're going to draw with your pencil and your ruler. You're going to measure out 6 inches by 6 inches. And again, this is a rough draft, but you're going to be repeating this for your final draft. So I want you to pay attention to craftsmanship. And what that means is you're not going to just do some quick line. You're going to use your pencil. You're going to use your ruler to measure out your dimensions. So in this case, it'll be 6 by 6. And I'm going to rotate my ruler accordingly. And I'm going to take my time to really take my pencil, lean it up against the ruler to draw out my lines. And you're going to do this with pencil, and you're going to do it very softly. And this is so that eventually when you do a final draft, that pencil won't be so noticeable when you cut it out. And at the end of this demo, I'm going to show you how to cut out paper with an X-Acto knife. Before our rough draft, we don't have to worry about that just yet. Okay, so once you have your squares drawn out with your ruler and your pencil, you're going to go in with your pencil for your initial sketching. And remember, whatever we're drawing in these panels is going to use Gestalt, right? They're going to connect through that implied line. But to get started, you're going to draw out very lightly. Okay, so you might start off with whatever design you have. Again, look back at your thumbnails from discussion board number 1. Based off my feedback, play around. So you won't even be able to see this when I'm drawing in this video yet, because it's so light, and it's very purposely done very lightly, okay? So that eventually you won't even be able to see it. I'm trying to get it, because you can see it really faintly. See those little circles there? Okay. So when you're drawing out with pencil, we don't want that pencil to show through our Sharpie when we're going to go down with Sharpie. So most students will draw very lightly, and they'll even go in, if they drew it too dark, they'll go in with an eraser and erase down the lines. When you go over these lines with the eraser, you can hardly see what you've done, but you can see the faintest line. And that's so that you can go back in with your Sharpie and draw out what you want to draw out, okay? Now remember, when we're using our Sharpie, there's a few things to keep in mind. Now, when we draw, we tend to draw from our wrist and our hand, when really that is not what we want to do. We want to draw from our arm and down. We want to relax. So you want to make sure you're sitting in a chair with both of your feet on the ground. You want to make sure you're sitting evenly and comfortably. You're not too slouched over. And you want to relax your shoulders and relax your arms, because you're really drawing with your whole arm. And the reason why I say that, if you're going to get too tight in how you're drawing, your lines are not going to be smooth. They're going to be jagged. But if your arm is relaxed, you're going to get a much smoother line that's going to use much better craftsmanship, okay? So make sure you're orienting yourself in this comfortable way when you're drawing. And then as you start to go around and add in your Sharpie lines, you want to make sure you're going fast enough so that your line doesn't get sort of that jaggy look to it. But you also want to go slow enough so that you're practicing good craftsmanship. And by craftsmanship, what I mean is it messy? Are you going in the same direction with your line? If you're filling in negative space, see how even when I drew this little tiny bit just popped up there, you'll have to go back over your lines to smooth those little mistakes out. And that's the challenging thing about Sharpie, but that's okay, because it gives you the opportunity to play with line width. So you don't necessarily want your lines to all be the same width, right? You might want some of them to have variety of width. And you might go in within your smaller micron pen or your extra fine Sharpie to fix some of those mistakes. So you might have a jagged line that you then take your finer point pen and smooth out and make really nice and crisp, because you want to have crisp lines, okay? We don't want bumpy lines as much as possible. But as you're drawing your composition, play around with those different line widths. They can create a really fun sense of space and variety. We're not going to talk too much about space just yet in this class in terms of things looking three-dimensional, but different line widths certainly helps that, okay? So we want to make sure as we're practicing our rough draft, we're doing that Gestalt where things are going to connect. We are drawing initially with a pencil very lightly, drawing out our designs, and then going back over it with Sharpie. We want to have a good variety of line thickness, and we want to make sure we're drawing comfortably with our arm. A few other things to keep in mind as we're drawing, we might find ourselves filling in negative space, right? Because we want to have a really great amount of balance between positive and negative space. If you're filling in black, all right, so some negative space, you'll want to use your bigger Sharpie marker, okay? And when you do so, you want to, as you're filling in the space, a lot of students will naturally do what's called banding, where they do like kind of like rows of filling in. This might bring you back to coloring when you were a young child. You do not want to do this where I kind of color it in by row, because it's going to show. You're going to be able to see that banding, which doesn't really look great. Instead, when you fill in something solid, you want to kind of vary where you start and stop. You kind of want to jump around instead of banding. So here I'm doing it correctly. So that's one thing to keep in mind as you're playing around with positive and negative space. But you want to remember, one of the goals of our assignments is to have that balance between positive and negative, like I talked about in our video. So as you're drawing out these panels, these compositions, this triptych, you want to ensure you're thinking about your balance. Do you have a focal point? Again, that might be a focal point in each panel, or there might be just one within all three. Are you cutting things off on the edge, like I talked about in our last demo, where things are kind of going off the edge of the composition? That keeps our viewer visually engaged, right? Are you using Gestalt? And you might use Gestalt in lots of different ways. You might use it through directional line, hence the name of our project, or you might use it doing patterns and textures. This assignment should use a variety of patterns and textures throughout our compositions. But here I'm creating that Gestalt, right? And I'm continuing it all the way down. We want to have that directional line that is organic. So we really are playing around with more of that organic curvular line. We don't want to define our shapes necessarily. We might get some circles because those are kind of organic naturally, but we don't want to bring in too much squares and rectangles because most of what we looked at in nature is going to be organic. That doesn't mean you can't use squares or triangles or rectangles, but we really want to rely more heavily on the more organic type of composition strategies for your final. Again, this is a rough draft, so this shouldn't take too much time. This is meant to just get things down on paper to start practicing with our Sharpies. You're going to make mistakes. It's going to look bad in certain areas, and that's okay. So once those are completed, you'll photograph them like I showed you in the first discussion board. And then you're going to upload that photograph and answer those 3 questions. And then that will be it for discussion board number 2. For discussion board number 3, you're going to be uploading your final project work in progress. So you're going to be about halfway done with your project and you're going to upload some photos. So for this part 2 of our demo today, I'm going to kind of show you how to get started with your final draft. So let's pretend like I'm getting a whole new piece of paper here. Okay, let's pretend like I don't have this drawing over here. Okay, you're going to, for your final, you are going to do the same thing. You're going to figure out your orientation based off my feedback that I give you for your discussion board number 2 upload. And you're going to then get your final paper prepared. So students are all different. Some students for their final, as it's in progress, they will draw out their 6" by 6" squares and they'll do it with pencil. And then they'll draw their panels while they're all on the same drawing paper, piece of paper, like the physical paper. While others like to cut out the panels first and then draw on them. So again, some students will draw out their squares that are going to be for their final. They'll draw their pictures in them, their designs in them, and then at the very end, they'll cut. Or you can cut the papers out at the beginning while they're blank and then draw on them. That's completely up to you. But what I want to do now is show you that once you start your final, you're going to draw out with your pencil, right? This is a little darker than really what it should be so you could see it. But I'm going to show you how to use your X-Acto knife and your ruler to cut out your paper, because eventually, no matter what you choose, you're going to have to cut it out for your final. So you're going to get your X-Acto knife and you're going to get your ruler. So you're not going to be able to tell, but I'm standing now, okay? So if you're cutting anything with your X-Acto knife, you have to be standing, and that's a safety precaution. It allows you to put a lot of more pressure on your hands as you're cutting, and therefore you can't cut yourself as easily. And I don't mean to scare you, but a lot of students have cut themselves with X-Acto knives. So standing helps that not happen. You need to be cutting on a self-healing mat like this, or if you don't have a self-healing mat, then you need to get the back of your paper pad, the cardboard portion, to cut. Do not cut directly on a table because you will ruin your table surface, okay? So I am a lefty, which makes it hard to demonstrate for you all, but I'm gonna try to show you from both ends. First, I'm gonna do it with my left hand. You're going to take your ruler and line it up with your lines that you're cutting, because you are basically cutting with your X-Acto knife this square piece of paper out, right? So you're gonna set your ruler has to be a metal ruler, okay? No wooden rulers or it won't work. Metal rulers are why, that's why that was required. You're gonna line up your ruler with the line that you drew, and you wanna make sure when you're cutting a little bit over to the line because we don't want that line to show. We want that line to go away, that pencil line. So I'm kind of nestling it right next to the pencil line, and I'm gonna cut it, but I don't want that pencil line to show in what I'm cutting out. I'm going to, with one hand, firmly push down on the ruler. And then with the other, I'm going to be cutting with my X-Acto. I'm going to be applying pressure with both hands down as I cut, and that's to ensure that the ruler doesn't slip, okay? So I'm going to take that. I am going to take the tip of my X-Acto knife, and I am going to lean it up against my ruler. So I'm applying a little bit of pressure here. And as I go down, I'm applying pressure onto the paper as well, like the tip of the blade to the paper, to ensure that I'm cutting the paper all the way. So as I apply pressure to the paper, I'm also applying pressure towards the ruler, and then I'm cutting downward. Always cut in this direction, starting away, then towards you, okay? And then I've cut my first line out, okay? I have my first cut. And then you will rotate your paper or your body, depending on what kind of table you're on. And you're gonna go through and cut the rest out. So some of you are right-handed, a majority probably. So I'll try to show you with right hand. Here, I will then hold the ruler with my left hand. And then I will hold my X-Acto knife with my right hand. I'll apply pressure on the ruler and on the X-Acto knife. I will lean the tip of the X-Acto knife against my ruler, and then I will cut down. And I'm going to cut slowly but swiftly. And now I have the next thing. So I'll do that to the two other sides. I'm going to switch back to my left hand so I don't cut myself. I'm going to do the two other sides. Just to show you really quick. And I'm going to do this for all three of my final draft panels. So again, this is final draft. So this is for discussion board number 3. This is not for your rough draft. And when you upload discussion board number 3, if you choose to keep your drawings on your paper, that's fine. You can upload them that way too. All right, so then I have my cutout paper, and that's going to be what I use for my final. You'll do that 2 more times to then upload it for your in progress. So really quick, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to go back to showing you very briefly I'm going to start sharing my screen. I want to go back to the discussion boards. So again, you'll upload your rough draft here. Going back to discussion board number 3, I want to review that as well. So I'm just opening up discussion board 3 really quick. Oops, sorry, 1 second. Bear with me. And then for your discussion board number 3, there's going to be a difference where you're going to be uploading your photos in progress, and you're also going to answer questions with the paragraph, and you're also going to be commenting on each other's upload. So this is for discussion board number 3, and you're going to be commenting on what each other says. All right, so you're going to go over here, you're going to do your normal reply. So you'll put in your photos, you'll put in your paragraph response, and then you'll respond so that it shows up, okay? Then the next day after this is due, by the end of the day, you need to go in and reply. So it says here, select 3 students' posts and comment on their rough draft using the following prompts. So you're gonna look, these are really just repeating the questions that you answered for yourself. You're gonna give them feedback based off of these things. You're gonna identify the strongest component of the composition, why it's working. You're gonna identify an area of improvement, and you're going to give some feedback regarding what could use more elaboration, detail, balance, or variety. And then you are going to give them some feedback on their focal points. So just read the directions carefully. So to do that, you're going to look for Colleen Merrill's photos, right? Or whoever 3 students you choose. And if a student has feedback from someone else, consider giving someone else feedback. So we can make sure everyone in the class gets feedback from their peers. That's important. So to give feedback, you just click reply on the bottom of their post. And it's like a comment on Facebook, right? Comment here. So you'll put your comment and then you'll reply there, and then you have them all done and ready. Okay. So that should be it for discussion board number 2. Discussion board number 3. We've got our demos here. We're ready now. Once we get that upload for discussion board 3, you'll get more feedback from me and you will be well on your way in your final. Please contact me anytime if you have any questions or concerns. Bye-bye.